Mr. President, last week, Kansas City lost a treasure, a very, very special person to the Kansas City community passed away last week. This is a man, Mike Murphy, who was loved by just about everybody in the area. And while his family and friends are gathered now in Kansas City for his memorial service, I'm sure there are hundreds that are there. I would like to place these words in the congressional record in his memory. And obviously, my prayers go out to his family. Mike Murphy has been part of the fabric of Kansas City for almost 50 years. Over 40 years, he was the most dominant local radio personality in all of the Midwest. He was popular. In fact, he became radio lore. At times over his career, over 50% of the people listening to the radio in Kansas City were listening to his program. He began his career in radio in 1968. He went on to rise to a class by himself in local and regional radio, and in fact was the winner of the prestigious Marconi Award in 1998. Thousands of truckers and salesmen throughout the Midwest heard him on the mighty KCMO and became his fans and his friends. His program was an essential part of their day. Why? What was there about this guy? He really didn't have a political agenda. Unlike today, he wasn't busy trying to get people all upset about the issues of the day. He didn't take sides on political issues. He rarely had big stars as guests, but from time to time they came through wanting to promote something because his show was such a dominant show in the area, they wanted to get on it. He was just a funny, irreverent guy who always made you feel like that you knew him when you listened to his program. He talked like a real person. He didn't try to show off his intellect. He was smart as a whip, but he never felt the need to impress anybody. I mean anybody. He just wanted to be your pal. He was fun and funny. He's famous, most famous in Kansas City for starting the second largest St. Patrick's parade in the country. How did he start it? In 1973, he was having a drink at a bar that a buddy of his owned. He and a very prominent PR guy who worked in campaigns around Kansas City, Pat O'Neill Sr., and maybe one or two of their other friends, called Larry Moore, a local news reporter, and said, we're going to start a parade. And they went out of Hogarty's bar and they marched a few blocks and they got a little film on TV that night, and the Kansas City St. Patrick's Parade was born. Years later, thousands and thousands of floats and hundreds and thousands of spectators, and every year in the St. Patrick's Parade, where was Mike Murphy? On a garbage truck. He always rode on a garbage truck. His way of signaling to the people of Kansas City, I'm no big deal. I don't need a fancy car. I'm just happy up here on the garbage truck. He was getting upset about Kansas City's heritage at one point. So in 1996, he decided we need to have a cattle drive again through Kansas City, hearkening back to our days as a frontier town and the stockyards were an important part of Kansas City's legacy. So what did he do? He started a cattle drive through downtown Kansas City. He would get some cowboys and then invite a lot of his pals, amateur cowboys, to get on horses and take these cattle down the main street of Kansas City. He loved characters. He thought being called a little goofy was the highest compliment you could pay him. He loved to talk about UFOs and aliens. His show was a vacation from serious. His humor was never at the expense of someone else. I was so fortunate to be one of the many that became part of his large group of regulars. It all began with a phone call to his show when I was driving back from Jefferson City to Kansas City as a young state legislator. This was over 20 years ago. He was saying stuff on the radio. Of course, I was listening to Mike Murphy as I drove, because everybody listened to Mike Murphy. He was saying something on the radio that wasn't correct. And this was before cell phones. I pulled my car off the highway. I remember to this day exactly where it was. I got on a payphone and I called his show because he was saying something that wasn't correct. I was scared to death. He took my call. I was scared. He was funny. And we became friends. Like hundreds and hundreds others, just like other people, just like me, we became friends. In fact, we became such close friends that he taunted me until I agreed to be part of the cattle drive. And so one year, there I was on the top of a horse, riding through downtown Kansas City behind a bunch of cattle. I think that might have been the last year of the cattle drive, because I think that was the year that some of them escaped into a parking garage in downtown Kansas City, and the Kansas City Police Department was having called upon to see if we couldn't get the Texas Longhorn cattle out of the top of a multi-story garage in downtown Kansas City. I was blessed to be in a bleacher seat to watch his heart at work. From his annual Salvation Army show, to his small acts of kindness to mere acquaintances, to his incredible loyalty to his friends. His heart was as enormous as his patience for BS was small. He also had no patience for pompous. Some of his famous shows were shows where someone came on his show that was really what would be considered a big deal, a star. And if that person began being arrogant on Mike Murphy's show, if that person started talking down to Mike Murphy's friends, his listeners, Mike would let him know in no uncertain terms that the interview was over, that he was not interested in allowing anyone to talk down to his pals, his listening audience. I will never, ever forget the twinkle in Mike Murphy's eye. And it's important that he remain one of Kansas City's brightest legends of all time. My hope for Mike Murphy's memory? I am not surprised that Mike chose the first 17 days of May to meet his Maker because of the fun that he had around St. Patrick's Day. My hope is that every St. Patrick's Day in Kansas City, people will raise a glass to Mike Murphy. And when they do, that they tell a funny story. It would be great if that story would be about Mike Murphy. But the most important thing is that it's a funny story. And let me tell you, Mike won't care if it's not even true. So to Mike Murphy, the kind of man that walks as a giant among us, and we don't even realize it until he's gone. A man who never lost sight that the little salesman out there driving in his car and the mother at home doing her family's laundry were the most important people on the earth. Here's to you, Mike. Godspeed, my pal.